Are you convinced, confident right now that Oscar Clifton was guilty beyond reasonable doubt?
I'm extremely convinced that he was guilty. It would be, you'd have to set a lot of logic aside in order to say anything other than that.
Oscar Clifton was convicted for the 1975 murder of 14-year-old Donna Jo Richmond in Exeter, California, which happened during the same time that the Visalia ransacker was terrorizing the area. In 2018, Joseph James DeAngelo was arrested, accused of being the ransacker, as well as the East Area rapist, the Golden State Killer, and the original Night Stalker, with burglaries, rapes, and murders spanning over a decade across the state of California. Richmond disappeared from Exeter, where DeAngelo lived and worked as a detective in the police department. His home was by the suspected path that she took when she disappeared, between her boyfriend's home and hers. Tony Reed has studied the case for 8 years and is convinced of Clifton's innocence. He says the Visalia ransacker had a motive to frame someone with his long string of crimes in the area. 5 days before Donna Jo's murder, a sketch of the ransacker was released after he shot at a Visalia police officer.
The sketch comes out of the ransacker. The ransacker has been identified. You can look at that sketch and for yourself and say whether or not that bears any similarities to Joe DeAngelo. Many people say it does. It's certainly this. It doesn't exclude him. But in that description, they put the offender, how tall he is, what he looks like. And it's close enough, in our opinion, that that's what makes DeAngelo decide that he has been outed. He needs to leave the area. He now is facing a capital murder charge because the ransacker's been identified as the person who kills Claude Snelling. He's tried to shoot a police officer, which at the time was a different capital offense.
That shooting was the last known Visalia ransacker incident. A few months later, the East Area rapist attacks began in Sacramento, around the same time that Joseph James DeAngelo left Exeter Police and moved to Auburn in the Sacramento Valley to work as a police officer.
You have to stand in the offender's shoe and consider what was possibly going on in his mind in that moment.
He needed to frame someone.
He needed to put the attention elsewhere. He needed to make someone else culpable for this crime. He needed to frame someone.
He was a smart guy. He was really smart in books. He had a good education. And I asked him, "What are you doing here, Joe? You should be at the FBI." And he stayed here for 3 years. He made investigator, and then he made sergeant.
At the time of the murder, Farrell Ward worked with DeAngelo as an Exeter cop. The case was in the Tulare County Sheriff's jurisdiction, but the night of Donna's disappearance, the Exeter Police Department was collaborating with the Sheriff's Office. Detective Bob Bird was working out of the Exeter Police Department, and Ward himself was called to bring in the Exeter PD's canine to search for Donna Jo. 6 years after Clifton's death, his family believes DeAngelo could have somehow manipulated the investigation. There's no evidence of that, but the Cliftons blamed Tulare County sheriffs of running a sloppy, suspect-based investigation at best and a corrupt one at worst, and the DA of being too politically invested in getting a big conviction. Local papers show how the DA's most recent homicide case before Clifton had been overturned because of prosecutorial misconduct, and he had promised to seek the death penalty right after Donna's body was found, which was finally lifted after Clifton's only successful appeal. Clifton's wife of 25 years, whom he married while in prison, said he died trying to clear his name.
What would Oscar say about his case to you?
I'm still innocent, and that's the whole story.
What was his theory?
Corruption in the sheriff.
To me, it was always they wanted a cut and dry, clean case. Let's get it done, close it up, and get it over with.
The taped statements from a potential alibi who placed Clifton right where he said he was while the crimes were suspected to have been committed disappeared until 5 years after the trial, without the jury hearing from him. Clifton said he didn't know about the existence of this tape. Something else he didn't know was that Detective Bob Bird ordered the evidence of the case destroyed within months of the trial ending. The Innocence Project became involved in this case, and that's when they found out there was no DNA left to test, so they dropped the case. The Tulare County District Attorney reviewed Clifton's conviction when DeAngelo was arrested. Assistant DA David Alavezo said he worked on the case for months, and in January of 2019, the DA closed the case once again, excluding DeAngelo as the murderer.
When we had an actual name to go with a number of cases around here that I can't get into, we decided, well, we now have a DNA profile, and let's just run that profile and see what happens.
What happened? The DNA of DeAngelo did not match a fraction of DNA that the DA says came from the seminal fluids of Donna's killer. The issue is, the lab that provided the strand of hair that was DNA tested concluded their samples had no semen.
So you have male fluid on a female's pubic hair who was nude from the waist down. It is completely a step away from logic to say that is anything but semen, and particularly when there was testimony at trial that it was semen.
There was expert testimony in trial that a different sample from the victim's pubic hair tested positive for semen, but no actual sperm was ever found. There are lingering questions about those tests and about whose semen it would have been, because the sample was never tested for DNA since it was destroyed. The strand of pubic hair that was tested was meant for reference. It wasn't the evidence sample that was addressed in testimony as to containing semen.
It was not treated as evidence. The chain of custody was not kept properly. So the possibility of, some sort of contamination is possible.
Not only can there be contamination, according to Vines, there was evidence of contamination found, and the lab that handled and stored that sample concluded their sample had no semen. Also, that no interpretation could be made.
The person that did the actual work is not willing to interpret it, but these non-experts are looking at the report and making their own interpretation, which doesn't make sense. The scientist is not willing to go there and is not willing to make an interpretation, so nobody else should.
Still, the DA's office made an interpretation and cleared DeAngelo.
For anybody to say that somehow we're protecting DeAngelo, their sanity comes into question. We're clearly not doing that. The other thing is somehow we're protecting a person who was a district attorney 40-some years ago who's no longer alive. That doesn't seem realistic either.
We reached out to Donna Jo Richmond's family, but understandably, they did not wish to relive the painful memories of what happened. We'll probably never know if Oscar Clifton was innocent. What we do know is that a jury in 1976 said he killed Donna Jo Richmond. We also know that Joseph James DeAngelo is suspected of being one of California's most prolific serial killers, and that he was living in the same town, working as a police officer, and could have collaborated with a department that was investigating the same case. According to police now, he was active as the Visalia ransacker at the time. DeAngelo is behind bars in Sacramento awaiting trial. I reached out to his attorney, but she said they have no comment on the case. As for Oscar Clifton's case, well, that is closed. Whether Clifton was guilty or not, he paid for the death of Donna Jo Richmond, and so did his family.
It destroyed his family name, and he was on the mercy of the courts. It's a heavy burden to bear, not just for himself, but for the families.
Back in those days, you didn't talk about things. I mean, it was things that, as they always say, skeletons in the closet. That's the way things were handled. We didn't want to talk to our mom because she was already stressed.
Yeah, we didn't want to.
She was dealing with so much herself.
She knew he was innocent. She didn't divorce him because she thought he was guilty. She divorced him because her life was so difficult.
Clifton's widow wrote and sent a letter to Joseph James DeAngelo when she heard the news of his arrest.
I'm not asking you to confess to murdering Donna Richmond, to clear Oscar's name. That's your choice. He never saw his kids again, never seeing the joy on their faces at Christmas or birthdays, never having the chance to say goodbye to his parents who died. waiting for a visit from family only to find a no-show. 37 years in prison, all the while you were out robbing, raping, and murdering people. Your name, Giangelo, will always be associated with the East Area Rapist, the Visalia Ransacker, the Golden State Killer. Now you know how Oscar felt, and he was innocent. Who suffers more, the innocent or the guilty? I wish you true peace.